Morning. I will call the regularly scheduled board meeting of Elk View Irrigation District Board of Directors to order. Mr. Lack, will you please lead us?
Yes, I will. Dear Heavenly Father, we want to thank you for these gentlemen and these ladies that have showed up here, Lord, to do business. We just ask you, Lord, to give us the wisdom and direction we need to do it well. We always ask you, Lord, to bless us with moisture on our watershed. And Lord, we just ask you, Lord, for peace in our valley and comfort for those who are sick today. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Mr. Calhoun, would you please pledge allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Before we get into the introduction of guests, I have one change in the agenda that I would like to make. I would like to move item 9C, which is the presentation on the dam project. I'd like to move that to directly after the calendar of events. Is there any objection? Hearing none, without objection, we will move item 9C to immediately follow the calendar of events. With that, we'll begin with the introduction of guests.
John Wynn, Indiana County Park Commission.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Invitation Larry Monty, your reclamation, the El Paso office.
Terry Johnson, property owner.
Paul Pompeo, Sauter Miller Associates.
Good morning, Jay Amlong with Kelly Cable.
Terry Nelson Dillon, Joe Nelson Inc.
Good morning, Michael Riley, Office Stadium.
Jeremiah Paul from the Office of the State Engineer. Max St. Louis, New Mexico Department of Ag.
Oops. Dave Anderson, with back to the fire.
Bill Sword with the Doniana Soil Water Conservation District.
Michael Torres with Kelly Cable. Steve Hernandez, Carlsbad Irrigation District.
Karen Byram, EBID.
James Ravasi,
Mr. President, online we have Dr. King, EBID consultant, Elizabeth Decker with the Bureau, and Cheryl Thacker with the OSC.
Thank you very much. Welcome all to our meeting. We appreciate your attendance. That brings us to the approval of the board minutes. The minutes are in your agenda from September 13th regular board meetings. Are there any additions or corrections? Hearing none, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of September 13th.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Frank Paul Salpeck, seconded by Ms. Tracy Esslinger to approve the September 13th minutes. Any discussion? Hearing none, discussion is closed. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
All right.
Any opposed? Okay, President, the ayes have it, motion carries. It brings us to item 5, calendar of events. Mr. Esslinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have a stormwater coalition meeting, on the schedule of the 19th. John, do you know where that will be at your office?
That'll actually be held at the church in Volume
Okay,
1:30 next Thursday.
okay, thank you. And that is true. There's not much more going on in October. In November, we have scheduled to send staff and board to the NWRA Ag Conference in San Antonio, and we'll attend that 8th, 9th, and 10th. There is also, we moved our board meeting, make note of that, to Wednesday, November 15th. And there will be another storm coalition meeting on that Thursday, to be announced. And then the district will close for Thanksgiving, 23rd to 24th. That's the calendar of events.
Thank you very much, Mr. Esslinger. Regarding the NWRA conference, I want to note that at the last meeting, we approved travel for that. And the board members that we had attending were myself, Mr. James Salpeck, Mr. Joe Paulak, and Mr. Sal Nunez. I want to confirm that those are still individuals planning to attend. Madam Secretary, if you would note those 4 individuals. And then finally, with movement of the board meeting to November 15th, I'm unavailable that day. I will not be in attendance to that board meeting. Board Vice President, Mr. Joe Pollack, has been informed that we will be conducting a meeting on that day. Any questions on the calendar of events? Hearing none, that brings us to item 9C. We have Mr. Johnson in attendance. Sir, you have the floor.
Well, good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. Again, my name is Terry Johnson. My wife and I own the property that the Avilar to the dam encumbers. And that dam, along with some of the other Avilar dams, are, as you probably know, are maintained by the Life Commission. We purchased that property back in 2005 as a long-term investment with the expectation that growth eventually would head northward and therefore increase the value of our property. That's essentially what my wife and I do. We buy and hold properties, wait after a period of time, and then turn around and sell them home. So a couple of years ago, we had Sauter Miller look into strategies regarding how we could maximize the value of that property and just come up with ideas how we could do that with the least amount of risk. And what we found was not only was that dam a physical impediment, we also started to realize that it's a risk in respect to its structure and then its ongoing existence. So just recently, we became aware of this reclamation cooperative watershed management program, and which we understand that the EBID is a coalition partner. And so after speaking with John Gwynn and Gil Sorg and Zach, we believe we identified a conceptual strategy that would address some of these concerns that we have, but would also be consistent with this watershed program. We also believe that this solution would, provide a benefit to the various stakeholders for which the EBID is a stakeholder. So that's everything in a nutshell, bring together, a general overview, but with a more specific approach. I'll turn it over to Paul and he can explain a little better what we're going to have in mind.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and board members. If I can, I'll run through a real brief PowerPoint presentation and then I'll answer your questions.
Do we have screen sharing turned on for that? Thank you.
Basically what we're proposing to do is work with EBID, local government entities, soil and water conservation district, private landowners and other stakeholders to develop and implement upstream watershed management practices and mitigate the effects of stormwater discharge from natural drainage features. As you can see from this slide here, there are several alluvial plain that has arroyos. They run down into the farmland and eventually into one of your drain facilities in this general area. The dams that Mr. Johnson spoke of are all the Alvear series of dams. They're colored on this slide here. There's quite a number of them. They were essentially built for siltation, flood management, and we believe there's better ways to manage those. Our goals are to review upstream arroyo features that drain into the Mesilla Valley and eventually to some EBID structures, employ watershed management methods such as water checks, slow water velocities, installation of sediment traps basins to reduce sediment entering the Mesilla Valley, remove archaic dam structures above the Mesilla Valley to reduce the possibility of catastrophic failures and property loss, direct treated stormwater to EBID drain facilities. Additional water flows in the drains, we believe, will have a positive effect by increasing water flow to enhance water quality and more direct groundwater recharge in the lower Rio Grande Basin. As a concept, this is just a concept plan where we, in this particular case here, we have a dam removal followed by the construction of sediment trap facility and then conveyance to an EBID facility. Now, I know that that's a big ask, But what we are here today to request from the board is we respectfully request from the EBID board permission to work with EBID staff to determine proper steps forward to determine the scope of engineering analysis needed to evaluate this proposal. Once determined, the applicant will make a formal request to the EBID board for a general support of this plan. Also here with me this morning is John Gwynn, Doñana County Flood Commissioner, and Gil Sorg with the Soil and Water Conservation Service that would be happy to answer any questions you might have, and I would be happy to answer any questions this board might have at this time. So thank you.
I would like to ask Mr. Gwynn and Council Sorg if they have any comments that they would like to add before I open it up for questions.
I do. So first of all, this particular structure is a very small one of our dams, and I know with EBID having a few of your own that you deal with, the prospect of getting rid of it is a good idea for us. Especially one that doesn't meet any of the current design standards, not designed to protect people. The only thing I have to say is that dam has functioned very well for all these years. It doesn't actually pose much of a risk to the public. And so there's kind of a balancing act we have to come into play here, because if we do remove it, then there are aspects of downstream flooding that have to be addressed. And if that happens, we obviously would request that the applicant goes through and takes care of all the engineering, all the design, figures out what's gonna happen so that no one downstream gets flooded from removing the structure. It obviously removes the liability of us from having a dam, but as the entity that does the operation and maintenance of the structure, we're very concerned about how that impacts your facilities, how that impacts the farmers down below, how it impacts I-25, because waters that come down from that watershed are then crossing Del Rey Boulevard and getting down to the culverts under I-25. So all these things have to be taken into effect and thought about as to how it gets out there. So it's not a small undertaking, even though reaching the structure is a very easy thing to do. It's all the downstream effects that become a big deal. So we're neither an advocate or an opponent to the project. If it's done, we want to make sure it's done right. We don't own the property. We only are working on an easement that was given many years ago to the Soil and Water Conservation District. And we as the Flood Commission basically have the responsibility of operation of it. So if there are any other questions, I'd be very happy to answer.
Thank you, sir. Councilor Sorg, did you have any comments you'd like to make?
No, that's okay.
Thank you very much. With that, would you bring it back up to the page that has your ask on it? I open it up to the board for either commentary or questions of the presenters. Mr. Lapp.
President Greg, on your assessment on the watershed, how much CFS could possibly run through there? What are we looking at? Say, because you talked about a maximum flow that could cause, if the dams function well, and it's kept that from happening, what is the amount going down? More or less. Has anybody done any figures on that?
Well, the original, original Arroyo watershed is about 300 CFS is
300,
what,
wow.
right. And of course, what the engineering analysis would be is whatever's reaching the drain now for your facility would not be increased or would have to be shown by analysis or upgraded. It could be handled. So as John stated, this is a pretty large engineering undertaking. And so in order to get to those specific answers, we really need to do some engineering review or a PER report to figure out what it is that can be done here. And so that's what we're asking the board for.
What is the discharge right now below the dams? Because that holds the 300 CFS. What does the dam let out?
It's 100 and I think it's 185 CFS. It's somewhere in there if the dam was at full capacity.
Yeah, okay.
And then the storage pool behind the dam head was excavated to its design volume.
He said it always held, so that's what's important to me as a person on the board. The second thing is, when you start getting over 100 CFS,
right,
people downstream in a vehicle or something like that could be overtaken easily because that much water. That's just my observation.
Yes, and that's what one of the things we're looking at is not only that specific spot where the dam is and lays slightly there, but we're looking at up upstream management practices through the Soil and Water Conservation Service to slow that water down, to not only reduce the velocities, but also to reduce the sedimentation loads. So it's a large, multifaceted step process.
Thank you, Mr. Lack. Other comments, questions? Ms. Eslinger?
So what would be the timeline, to do this analysis, and what kind of in interacting with EBID staff, what kind of, time do you think that puts on our staff to work?
Well, at this point in time, because of this engineering undertaking, today as we sit before you, we're not quite sure what that engineering analysis even looks like. We need to get into the drains and other capacities and facilities and things like that to even be able to put a pin as to how we're going to do the analysis. So our first step would be just to meet with the EBID staff and get a handle on the overall facility operations that's going on right now, size and capacity of the drains, size and capacity of the structures that are in your facilities, and then start working backwards to even figure out what an engineering analysis looks like. So unfortunately, we're trying to get that question answered, and then that's the one that you asked, but to get before the staff, just so we can figure out how we can get there from here. So that's where we're at.
And the second part of that question is what kind of, is this something that our staff can absorb in terms of time with all the other projects going on?
Oh, I see. Okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood your question.
That's okay. You answered.
No, I don't. I believe a series of meetings with the staff and maybe 2 to 3 hours a piece, and then maybe some staff time to gather up the data that we're requesting. I don't see it as a huge undertaking, but that would allow us to take that information and then come back and meet with staff and say, this is how we propose to do this analysis, and then have your staff agree that that's the way that we're going to do it. So it's mostly on us, but we would request some staff time just to get that historical and record information from EBID.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments from staff, or excuse me, from the board? I have a question, Mr. Eslinger. What is your opinion on the EBID's ability to meet the request if the board directs staff to cooperate with the presenter?
Mr. Chair, I think for what they're requesting from us, we could take a little bit of time, our staff could just review what the impact would be to the Diana drain and give them some information about the capacity of the drain. Certainly we want to know who will maintain it after the project was put in. And certainly that would be something we want to consider. But I think staff is available, and certainly we're aware of the project already. We know that it's been suggested to us to look into it. So I felt like this is maybe the time for this group to just come in and introduce the concept. And certainly it would take a little bit more time for us to just engage with them to understand. There's a lot of engineering that would have to go on that Paul would be responsible for, but certainly the flows coming in and how it would get there. And then of course, the capacity of our drain to carry the flood water. But overall, recharging the aquifer, capturing flood flow, that's what we're all about. And so it's a possibility.
Thank you, Mr. Eslinger. So my comment would be, as we're looking to improve the Rio Grande project area moving into the next century, these sort of collaboration between other government entities, other agencies, private landowners, is the kind of collaboration that will be needed to find holistic solutions to our water needs in the future. And I'm grateful for you all that you came to present this idea to us and that you have a specific request for us. We need to find ways that we collaborate, cooperate, that we work together for solutions, not just those that come and sit in this room every month. So I appreciate that opportunity. With that, the request of the board of directors is to grant permission and I would suggest specifically direct staff to work together with the presenters to determine the proper steps forward to determine the scope of analysis needed to evaluate the proposals. What is the will of the board?
Greg, I move that we give them whatever permission they need to get started on the project. It's sure not saying we're gonna okay, but we're gonna say we're sure like to look into it and see what we can do to help the process happen. I'd like for him, if you don't mind, to go back to where he's gonna do the pulling area,
Sure.
because one thing that we're.
Well, let me finish the motion. We'll use that as part of the
Thank you,
discussion.
thank you, right there.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
I have a second from Mr. Sam Calhoun, and then an opening discussion. Mr. Lack asked me to go back.
That green area that you're gonna be pulling that to, is that a piece of ground that you think you have access to? In other words, is it government grounds, is it private ground? Because sometimes if it's federal ground and it's up there on that end of the world, those are hard people to deal with.
Yes, sir. Well, in this conceptual plan, the green area actually sits on private property.
Okay.
There was an old detention area here. You can see it in the aerial photography. That came in from these two box culverts that are under the interstate. And so working with yet another landowner, you know, there's landowners on the upstream side of the interstate and downstream side. So we don't actually know who, you know, we reach out to them, but this would build like a sedimentation pooling area, get rid of or drop the sediment out as best as we can. And then we'd have a conveyance down here to the Doniana drain. Now, to one point here, and Mr. Gwynn brought it up, these box culverts under the interstate were designed to the 50-year design storm prior to this dam being constructed. So we're not too concerned about the interstate structures. However, you can see there's another dam right to the north, and these little dams exist up and down here. And so that's kind of our thought process in moving forward, like the chairman spoke of, is how do we all work together to enhance all this and everybody end up in a win-win situation. So that's our plan. We understand it's quite an undertaking, especially from the engineering side. But with the board's permission to work with EBID staff, I believe that we can get that quantified for an engineering analysis, then be able to come back to the board with a specific request of what we're planning on doing.
Thank you. That answers my question.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, discussion is closed. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Being the president, the ayes have it, and the motion carries. Mr. Esslinger, please direct staff to cooperate with Sodom Miller Associates in discussions of how to scope this project. Yes, sir. I'll do that.
Thank you, Chairman and board. Thank you very much for this opportunity and your time this morning. Thank you.
Mr. President, I would just like to take the opportunity to remind the audience that we are recording this. Please silence your cell phones. We are recording this, and it is difficult to get a recording with other background noise. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Mrs. Saltek, and I appreciate that. Besides our attorney, she's also our sergeant at arms.
And a little grumpy today.
Okay, so moving on, here comes to water resources. Good morning, Dr. King.
Good morning. Okay, well, I even went out and got donuts just so it would feel like an EBID board meeting this morning. Let me get organized here. Okay. All right, first of all, we are very rapidly approaching the end of the release season. These are basically the storage numbers that we're looking at when we hit shutoff, which could be on or about Friday of this week. EP1 will be shutting down then. So we got about 336,000 in Elephant Butte. Caballo is down at 7,000 at this point. What is happening there is Reclamation is running it down so that they can get in and do some work on the outlet works. And so they basically have to drain it in order to do that. We did that back in 2016, and then we got it down to a pool of about 4,600 acre feet. I'm not sure that the numbers are are quite comparable because they use different bathymetry, which is the relationship between the water surface elevation and the storage volume. But we are getting right down to it. I wish this were because we've been telling them to run Caballo down routinely to minimize evaporation losses to the project, but in fact, it's so they can do work on the outlet works. That leaves us with about 343,000 total. I do not have a good number for Rio Grande compact credit water. It's actually going to be somewhat less than this, maybe a few tens of acre feet due to evaporation since I got this number. There is no San Juan Chama water in storage. That leaves us total usable storage of about 343. We have those minimum pools in Caballo and Elephant Butte, but notice we are already violating the 12,000 acre foot floor on Caballo storage. So you could add another, I suppose, 12,000 acre feet of releasable water there, at least 8,000 acre feet that would be releasable. And we have so far released about 547,000 acre feet from Caballo. It continues to, Caballo is continuing releases, though it is winding down. And our net inflow is pretty unstable, but it is about zero. So basically what this short story here is that we're going to go into our off season here with about 343,000 acre feet, called 340,000 acre feet in combined storage. Keep in mind that a lot of that will be taken up by particularly EP1 carryover, but also EBID will have some carryover that'll come out of that. So we've got very little new water since we last allocated. And the reason for that is the last allocation we did was in June. And if you look at the net inflow into Elephant Butte Reservoir since June, notice it did plummet at the end of the month, and we basically haven't gotten anything in. So while we quit allocating fairly early, we really did allocate almost all of the water that was available this year because it did go and die on us. Also, keep in mind as we look at the hydrograph coming down the river, we're running around about 50%, except from Otoe Gauge. At Otoe Gauge, we've got a lot of flow coming out of Chama, and that is the same as last month, where they're moving water out of storage in Abiquiu down to Cochiti. Abiquiu, of course, is on Rio Chama. Cochiti is on the main stem of the Rio Grande. Reclamation is moving water down from Abiquiu to Cochiti just like with Caballo, they're bringing the level down in Abiquiu so that they can do work on the dam itself. And come November 1st, they will start releasing that water from Cochiti down to Elephant Butte. So we should get a slug of water in November and December, something on the order of 100 to 150,000 acre feet of water that is already in storage that will be moving down from Cochiti to Elephant Butte. And then we've got the river is dry, essentially dry at Bernardo. It is also dry at San Marcial. The water you see here is water in the low flow conveyance channel, which much of it is not making it to Elephant Butte, so that net inflow into Elephant Butte remains pretty close to zero. I think that's all I wanted to say on that. We are now starting the 2024 water year. It started October 1st. So first off, there was a trace of precipitation on the upper Rio Grande, in the upper Rio Grande sub-basin, but it created some interesting percentages. Basically, what these numbers out here indicate is the percentage of average precipitation on the 11th day of the water year. And of course, this year it's a 366-day water year. So it is not particularly meaningful now, but we will begin to track that each month. This does not mean that we're above average for the year. In fact, the monsoon season was pretty disappointing. The climatologists have declared the monsoon to be over and a bit disappointing. Wasn't as bad as say 2020, but it wasn't as good as we've had the last couple of years. This is the December, January, and February outlook. I like to start looking at it about this time of year because this December, January, February window is the thick part of our snowpack season, although we can get some pretty significant snow even into March. And it is not all that dismal. You'll notice that on the precipitation outlook, this again is December, January, February. For the lower part of our basin, it is actually precipitation is forecast to be above average. Unfortunately, the part of our basin that yields the most water is the up around the state line, and there it's equal chances. So flip a coin, and that's how much water or how much snowpack we can expect. Also encouraging is that the temperature outlook is not forecast to be as hot as it has been during our monsoon season. What we saw was a hot, dry monsoon. What we are hoping for is a moisture, cooler fall into winter season that you see indicated by these forecasts. These came out September 21st, and I don't think there's been a whole lot of change in the system that would cause these forecasts to change if they were doing them now. One of the things that we really have to keep in perspective here, though, is the uncertainty that we're dealing with at this time of year, particularly for these newer board members, newish board members. I guess you're not all that new anymore. Right now, forecasts are highly uncertain. To illustrate the point, I figured, well, what did I tell you a year ago tomorrow? Well, I went back, and this is what we've got for this year. This is what we had on October 12th of last year at our board meeting. Notice that we were forecast to be below average precipitation for the same period, December, January, February, and above average temperature. And then we got the 2023 snow season on top of that. So, well, this is what it says. Take it with a grain of salt, because this is definitely not what happened. We got the best snowfall that we've seen since 2019 in the 2023 snow season. The pointers are looking in a favorable direction, but again, the uncertainty level is high. So be ready. You'll see that I do hedge my bets and assume the worst. I come by it honestly. Looking at the drought monitor from last month, you see this where we've got extreme drought, patches of it throughout New Mexico, a lot of severe drought all the way up into the headwaters where we've got some only abnormally dry. If we bring that forward to this month, which this is as of October 5th, you see it hasn't changed the shape a whole lot. It's intensified a little bit. Things are particularly dry down there. You'll notice in Carlsbad. But we still seem to be headed, we've got a fairly optimistic outlook for the December, January, February window. But where we are looking right now, a snapshot is still trending towards drought. If we look at the seasonal outlook, and the NOAA updated this since the beginning of the month, they made this drought area in the upper Midwest quite a bit more severe than they initially had it So they've updated that in the upper Midwest. But notice you can kind of see the same pattern where we'll see perhaps a little improvement in the southern part of the state, but basically persistent drought throughout the Rio Grande watershed. Our El Nino is still in place. You'll notice a year ago, we were locked up here in stable, persistent. Well, that was the tail end of 3 years of La Nina conditions. Then we heated up, and you'll notice down here that we are starting to get a little bit of cooling in the Eastern Pacific, which is where we really keep an eye on it for our weather systems. However, this was a pretty strong El Nino, so it'll remain in place. They've got 95% January through March, which takes us right through our snow season. El Nino will remain with us, and hopefully that will help us out with some snowpack. All in all, and by the way, this is a Albuquerque specific picture here. We've got the balloon festival going on, and I walked out of the doctor's office on Monday, and this balloon almost landed in the parking lot I was parked in. So I went over and watched them land. Anyhow, Mexico shut down as of September 30th. I think I mentioned to you that I expected them to run as long as El Paso #1 did. They actually shut down on September 30th after using only about 46,000 acre feet. And I say approximately because I have actual numbers up through August, but I estimated September numbers. It won't be much different from this. I don't think it'll go over 46,000. But remember that they were allocated 60,000 acre feet. Apparently, they just didn't have the demand for it. In my discussion with IBWC, they said they didn't have a home for it, so they stopped. EP #1 has announced their shutdown, the shutdown at Caballo on or about October 13th. They will then coast through a few days, and their charges will cease as of October 31st, which is really the end of the year for us. As I say, the monsoon has been a disappointment. It was a hot and dry monsoon. We like just the opposite. We will base our final allocation on October 31st, 2023 conditions. And I don't see a whole lot more water that will be in the allocation over what we did in June, just because, it ran, we had a couple of big weeks in the second half of June after we allocated, but after that, it's been a very quiet, a very dismal runoff season. Again, I'm not sure, we're still close on the carryover spill. Both districts will certainly have carryover. EP1 will probably be up over 200,000 acre feet of carryover, and EBID will have a very few tens of thousands of acre feet in carryover. As I mentioned before, Cochiti storage will be moving down to Elephant Butte starting November 1st. I didn't read it out, but if you saw in my river chart, MRGCD is still running over 500 CFS. Hopefully by November 1st, they'll be shut down so we can get a clean run of that water straight down into the reservoir. Bottom line is for us in particular, we've got a few tens of thousands of acre feet in carryover, but our supply is going to be very dependent on what happens with our snow season. And it's uncertain. It's unfortunate to always be looking up, and it's sort of like living paycheck to paycheck, where you don't have that big bunch of carryover. We do have decent carryover, but remember, a lot of it is tied up in carryover or in individual district carryover, particularly for El Paso #1. And so I am hedging further down. We will likely have an allotment on the order of 6 to 12 inches. And my recent history has been that in August, I said 12 to 14. In September, I said 8 to 12. Now I'm saying 6 to 12, and that 6 to 12 is me hedging just in case we have a real poor snow season again. And with that, I will open it up for questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. King. Mentioned that I did hear you say not all that dismal of an outlook, so that sounds really good compared to your usual reports. Any comments or questions from the board? Hearing none. Thank you very much, Dr. King.
Okay, let me find how I.
Mr. Narvaez.
Good morning, everybody. We still need to do a wrap up for the season, so I don't expect to have a season recap probably until December board meeting. Because the end of this month, we'll wrap up with the accounting. Once Dr. King gets that done, it'll probably take us into the board meeting in November. So I anticipate having a seasonal wrap up December. So no report for today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Narvaez. Any questions for operations? Thank you. So that brings us to general and administrative. I'm going to ask the fiscal year budget 2024 be presented first. I don't know if that's Ms. Byram or if that's Mr. Francois.
Mr. President.
All right, good morning, everybody. It's gonna be relatively the same presentation that we went over on Monday with a few changes based on comments and questions directed to me by the board. You'll see those reflected later on in the presentation. Kind of a recap. We have, scenario inputs for expense scenario. That's gonna be your departmental expenses that you would see on the income statement. You're gonna have your labor raise scenario. That's the salary and wage increases you anticipate giving employees. You're gonna have a overtime scenario, which will be two components. One is overtime based on the irrigation season, based on what Phil King said. We might be over budgeting in that if we only have a 2-month irrigation season, if we lean more towards the 6-inch allotment. So keep that in mind. And then a flex scenario, which is, the decision if we hire employees in one department, but we flex them to another department so that we can maximize kind of, our budget. Going into the first scenario, and it's important to note, as you see in the box below, that scenario 1 is the base case scenario, meaning that all scenarios selected include scenario 1. Scenario 1 is the needs of each department to operate. They cannot operate without those needs. As an example of, the maintenance department here, you can see that scenario 1, we got to get some dump trucks. Those will be coming in this year, so on and so forth for each department. They cannot go on without scenario 1, and that's why scenario 1 is inclusive in every other scenario following. The labor raise scenario, you can see it broken out into 4 scenarios. There is 4 scenarios for each of the scenarios mentioned. Scenario 1 under here for all departments is 3%, which is based on, a business standard practice of anti-inflationary measures. So that'll be carried forward throughout all overtime scenario. It's very similar to how this is broken out here in terms of hours, and that's going to be based on whatever we elect for irrigation season. Right now it's 3 months, but we also take into account a seasonality component for all overtime expected to incur from workers. You see here, this is an example of, again, the maintenance department. They're kind of my guinea pig throughout these first few scenario explanations. And you can see that, the ditch riders do not have any time because they're running water and maintenance, but you can see the various overtime calculations such as, you know, fabrication stuff through the irrigation season there. This would be an example of what you would see. You can see that, again, we're in maintenance. Ditch riders do not work in maintenance through the irrigation season, so they will be removed from the financial labor scenario there. And then overtime will flow through. These are not actual numbers. It's important to note that. This is confidential salary information, so I kind of just made these all the same there. This was a question that came up Monday from the board. They wanted to see the age of our equipment, so I put together some charts for the north, central, south, and district-wide. This is only related to machinery and equipment, and so will the next slide, but they carry the same theme. They will not be related to vehicle replacement. For instance, in the north here, you can see what year the equipment was acquired. The second column will show you how old it is, just so you don't have to do the math yourself. What type of equipment it is, our expenses occurred to date on, you know, O&M on those. The estimated cost to replace that equipment. And then I put another column that'll show you the net value difference between what our expenses incurred to date less the cost of the equipment. So you can see that here we have some equipment that's up to 41 years old. Some of it's 30. You're averaging about 15 years old. It is standard business practice, and you'll learn this from every accountant, that equipment is to be replaced in 15-year cycles. That's usually the depreciation life of heavy machinery and equipment is 15 years. Houses are 29 and a half. Office equipment or like desks and stuff is in that 15 year as well. But just for the record, 15 years is the, you know, industry across all industry standard for equipment. Any questions here based on what was provided to me on Monday?
Mr. Franzo, do you happen to know the total asset value of the book asset value of the equipment listed prior to depreciation?
Not off the top of my head, but I could get that to you.
Thank you. Not necessary. Thank you very much.
Any other questions before I continue? Okay. It's important to note that this is a hypothetical example. We talked about your deferred, I guess you'll say capital expenditures, right? And your total replacement costs. And this is going to highlight a hypothetical example of kind of what that catch-up period looks like. So again, these scenarios are based only on heavy machinery and equipment, not trucks, but they all carry the same theme. So for 2024, why those are all highlighted blue is because those are all scenario one purchases for heavy machinery and equipment under the maintenance department. You can see the bottom that leads to a total expenditure of $313,000. And hypothetically, if you were to increase CapEx by 6% a year, and this is just all a hypothetical situation, you can see that the needs of the department to purchase equipment going forward, you actually have those deferred capital expenditures, which are rolling over. So if you, in 2025, if your budget was increased by 6%, you'd have $331,000 you'd spend on equipment. The difference between your needs for what the department needs and your budget would roll forward. And you can see that that's an ever increasing amount. However, when you look to, does everybody understand kind of how this works? So essentially what you're doing is you're kicking the can down the road. You're saying, well, we can only buy this equipment this year. So the rest that we need, we're going to have to purchase it down the road another time. This would be scenario two, which you can see that those are yellow highlighted, that I moved from year 2025 to 2024. You'd be at a $810,000 budget. I know it increases by 6% also. I just wanted to kind of hold that constant to show you this. I know that takes into account compounding and other, you know, financial things. This is just a hypothetical example, but if you carried kind of that same increase, you could see that you actually start to tackle this problem by 2031. You actually start to come down and get ahead of your equipment needs and replacement costs versus going back to this example where it's ever increasing, you're just digging yourself in a hole. So this is what I was talking about when you defer kind of the purchasing of your machinery and equipment to a point to where you can't catch back up because you're constantly replacing stuff at a rate less than which stuff is going out.
And that's including scenario 2.
This is scenario 2, if we were to just kind of operate with that budget. Obviously, I can't forecast what the board would elect for budget increases on CapEx in the future, increasing assessment rates. There's a lot of factors that go into this. That's why I kind of kept it as a hypothetical example. But even if I increase this example by 3%, it would still catch up. I just want to show that catch up period a little quicker just to kind of get the concept in mind. Because it is kind of a hard thing to grasp.
I have a couple questions for Mr. Franzoy, but are there other questions from the board regarding this CapEx example? Ms. Franzoy, I had 2 questions. In both of these scenarios, by 2034, what's the maximum age of our equipment?
Gosh, well, let's see, that's 10 years from now. So on average, you're going to be looking at probably about 30 years old plus.
Is our maximum equipment age?
Some of it would be 50 years old. 51 years old would be the maximum.
Presumably, we're replacing some equipment.
Right, and that's listed here.
And so in that example, we've got where we're at, where we've got equipment that has not been replaced on an equipment replacement schedule that meets industry standards. How much closer are we to getting there in your example, or are we essentially just staying static?
And in which example? Because there's 2 examples.
Let's take a look at them both.
Yes, so under example 1, if you were to kind of keep the mindset of the board in recent years, and that's not increasing the assessment for 5 years, given the drought, things of that nature, kind of having a closed mindset on assessment increases, you'll be kicking the can down the road and you will never catch up.
So under this scenario, by the time we get to 2034, our average fleet age will be older than it currently is?
Correct. Well,
Thank you. Yeah, under scenario 2, is our average fleet age moving in the right direction?
under scenario 2, by 2034, you have purchased, in this example, you have the availability to purchase $2.4 million of equipment exceeding replacing all the old equipment.
Thank you. That is a useful, very useful piece of information in that by 2034, we've got $2.5 million to replace our ancient equipment.
Yes, under this hypothetical example. Now it's going to be different depending on, assessment increases, how much the board allocates towards the purchasing of new equipment and machinery and equipment in the future. However, you can see in this example that by 2031, you have dug yourself out of the hole.
All the way out? Or
All the way out. That means you're running effectively all replaced machinery and equipment over that 7-year time span or 6-year time span in this example. Now, this is not correct numbers. That's why I haven't read hypothetical example, because there's so many variables that go into this, but the point remains the same, is that if you are proactive now in your capital expenditure and are focused on that, then you will have all new machinery and equipment to operate the district.
Thank you. And in this hypothetical example, we're increasing our capital expenditure 6% a year. How much are you inflating the replacement costs year over year in this example?
None. This is just a base case. That's why it gets a little scary, because
To be clear then, this example is showing us if we had a capital expenditure increase of 6% in excess of inflation, then that's what we have. So that is not a static 6%. That is 6% greater than simple inflationary increases.
right, and that's the reason I chose 6%, is because theoretically you should be increasing for anti-inflationary measures your budget needs, and the equipment cost would also increase at 6% as well.
Thank you very much. Those are the questions I have.
Or 3%, sorry.
Any other follow-up questions? Thank you, please continue.
Okay. Here is kind of the overview of scenario one. You can see here that all scenarios are base case. You have ones across the board. So this is the base needs of the department. You can see that that puts us at a surplus deficit of about negative $19,000. So a deficit of 19,000 to be clear. There is some things we can go to operate this at a net zero budget. So for all intents and purposes, this is a net zero budget here. So for scenario one, you have a high uptick if you were to look at these graphs here of your monthly expenses for the months of October through March. This is mostly attributable to grant expense, which is included in our total expenses. However, that nets out with grant revenue. So you see that uptick in expenses, and that's about 250K to 280K a month for those months. Beginning cash includes $200,000 of rollover cash from fiscal year 23, and the remaining difference, which is $136,192, is anticipated from the Kinder Morgan reimbursement. Any questions there real quick? I know, Dwayne, this is your first time running through this, so. Scenario one, you kind of have, this is what your departmental expenses would look like. You can see at the top in the graph is depicted in dollar values. If you looked at your expense percentage by department, from greatest to least, you'd see that maintenance is about 31% of all EBID expenses. Admin is 28%. Now, in business, administration can mean a lot of things. Here at EBID, what we did is we shifted our network cost, which is about $200,000 annually, which maintains all our SCADA department and information systems, into admin. We also got rid of splitting out fuel by department, which was done last year. That was the first year they did kind of departmental budgets, but we wanted to be able to track departments specifically by what the department does. So pulling in fuel, which is an overall benefit for the organization, we wanted to bring all of those kind of big bucketed expenses into admin that every department benefits from. Going down, you can see that irrigation is 13% of the budget, engineering is 7%, board expenses is 6%. That includes legal, board election fees, board travel, things of that nature. SCADA department is 6%. Finance is 5%, HR and safety is 2%, and groundwater is 2%. And if you were to look at what that is, the value of your assessment, where your $90 goes, you can see that broken out to the right in terms of dollar values there. Is there any questions here? Okay. So this is kind of your grouped expenses for scenario one here. You can see that the number one expense at EBID across all departments is labor and fringes. Grant expense is the number two cost. However, this is offset by grant revenue, so that effectively is a $0 expense. Operations is our third highest expense at $985,000, and then capital outlay, which is the purchase of machinery and equipment here specifically, is about $550,000. You get into legal, which includes all of legal expenses and expert consulting, such as Dr. King. That'll be the fifth highest expense. Then you get into communications, that's cell phone network expense, things of that nature, fuel, repairs and maintenance, and then other administrative costs, consulting, travel, etc. Any questions here? Okay, so scenario one, just wanted to point out kind of what I laid out there, that grant expense is canceled out by grant revenue. You can see kind of what that would look like here. The grants that we have is for drought resiliency, conservation, and water efficiency programs. Legal was one of those expenses that has come up in the past, and it was the direction of the board to decided to hire in-house counsel, so you can see that under those scenarios, I have programmed a scenario of the difference of hiring in-house counsel versus continuing with outside counsel. So with in-house counsel, you're looking at what we saw earlier, that negative $19,000 deficit. However, if we continued with our in-house counsel, you would have a surplus of $183,000. So it's actually more expensive to go with inside counsel. And the reason for that is Samantha's cost would uptick slightly relative because she would be training this new employee. And because we hire an in-house counsel under salary, we are required to pay para benefits or fringe benefits for that matter. And that equates to across the board, we determined would be 33%, which you'll see in the next slide here. So if you paid in-house counsel $150,000, it would equate to approximately $200,000 because of the benefit load that you have to give that employee. Any questions here? And it's important to note that exceeding that, let's say a 1-year training period, that your legal counsel fees between in-house and external legal counsel would not decrease. The only thing that would change is the workload would be dispersed amongst your legal teams. Departmental expense per acre. We can look at this. This will be total expenses per acre for the entire district. You can see that the total expense per acre would be about $119. That is different from the $90 assessment that we charge, and that's related to grant revenue and expense and things of that nature, to where EBID achieves revenue streams through, licensing and permitting, grants, so on and so forth. So if we were to remove kind of those revenue streams and the things that EBID does for the district, that differential would be $29 from your assessment. So farmers, if they wanted all the same things to be done, would typically have to pay about $120 assessment fee without all the grants and stuff, which is primarily due to our experts. Our outside legal counsel does a lot of getting us those grants. I'm not sure if I can speak about the one we met at yesterday. No, okay. So I will shut up there, but you can see it's about a total savings of $2.6 million that EBID employees have for the district. Any questions over kind of what you're seeing for the basis of scenario 1? Okay, cool. Scenario 2, this is very important here. What scenario 2 does is, for the expense scenario, it adds machinery and equipment for maintenance and effectively computer replacement for engineering, so that they can do AutoCAD design, things like we mentioned with this flood control project. They can do that more efficiently. Having the computers that they have currently is not equipped for them to handle the job. The labor raise scenario is for employees. Now, not every employee gets the same labor increase under this scenario. However, this is primarily for maintenance and irrigation, to bring the ditch riders and heavy equipment operators up to competitive pay, to where we're not losing them via turnover to other agencies. And it just kind of keeps employee turnover at a minimum and retention higher. The flex scenarios, you'll see those 2 yellow for flex employees. One's for engineering, one is for finance. The engineering one hires a project manager under Hayden. The finance hires a temporary finance clerk under Karen. Any questions for scenario 2? We left the board's direction to hire in-house counsel and the Kinder Morgan reimbursement there under the other scenarios. And we left overtime anticipating a 3-month irrigation season, kind of limiting as much overtime as possible. We'll be able to achieve that because these scenarios have the filling of all our open positions, which is approximately 20 open positions here at EBID. I think there's 9 in maintenance and about 12 in irrigation, 9, 12.
Joe, can you explain to the audience and to the board that may not know Casey Carroll?
Yeah, so Casey Carroll is, I guess you could say he works with Samantha as the expert for the Kinder Morgan case. Samantha will be using him throughout the year. I'm sure she could highlight kind of what she intends to use him for. But he is an expert who works for us well at EBID. He doesn't really have a large impact to the budget, just for the record. So it was our determination that we would be using him for fiscal year 24. So we kept him in the budget definitively.
Dr. Carroll is our contaminant transport expert for groundwater issues, and I'm currently using him to do different projects, which will ramp up over the next year. One may not, but other two will.
Good. So just to recap, kind of scenario 2, you're getting a project manager in engineering. You're getting a finance clerk in finance. You're getting way more CapEx that we talked about, kind of that CapEx catch-up period. You're achieving that under this scenario. And you're revamping all engineering's computers so that they can do their job effectively. And you're increasing your labor rates to be competitive with the market. It is also important to note that, we chose scenario 4 outside of the maintenance department irrigation, which were our primary targets to be more competitive for ditch riders and heavy equipment operators. But if you remember last year, and I wasn't here, that the upper level staff had forfeited their salary increases to meet the needs of the district. And so I think it's only fair that we compensate them for their nobility there to do that and undertake that. So going here under scenario 2, you're seeing a deficit of $730,000 compared to scenario 1 of, a deficit of 19,000, or we'll call it net zero. This warrants an assessment adjustment of about $10. You will have some fluff in there because it's really about, I think all in all, $8.50 once you get into it. But you will have some fluff for some capital expenditures, as we said, to kind of catch up period faster. That's why I say there's so many variables. It'll depend on what the board does there in the future. But everything that I mentioned prior to this on the last slide, you're getting that benefit for a $10 assessment increase. And here are the kind of the key points. I'll highlight them again, but here's a visual for you. It's approximately $205,000 related to salary increases. That's for the project manager in engineering, the temporary finance clerk, and all heavy equipment and machinery operators and ditch riders to be more competitive in the market, on top of, the other salary increases that aren't as high. I mean, the main target was to give a large pay bump to the heavy equipment operators and ditch riders. You also see a capital outlay or purchase of machinery and equipment of $640,000. That's 2 loaders at $231,000 each, a 20-ton equipment trailer, $52,000, potential equipment rentals that we'll need to maintain the district for $50,000, 2 half-ton irrigation trucks at $50,000, and the upgraded computers and miscellaneous equipment for engineering of $20,000. Any questions there? Okay.
Joe, one of the things I'd like you to explain right here that really helped me in this whole process is when we looked at that assessment of $10, and I'm not saying that's a magic number, but that's one that fits mine the best. When you look back in time on assessments through the years of EBID, because of the drought, because of other reasons, we didn't increase it. But if we did that to $10, you told us the other day that would fit exactly what we've been doing to cover the things that we've been doing.
Correct.
Can you explain that to the rest of you? Because when you explained that to us the other day, I really like that.
Yeah. So, and I have this, that is the one thing that I forgot. Would you guys like me to open up my email and pull that up real quick so we could see those assessments? I think that'd be the best way so that you can visualize it. Let me log in really quick.
What are you doing exactly?
I'm pulling up the historical assessment rate increases for EBID.
Could we have those printed for the board members instead of opening our system
Yeah.
to the public?
Karen, could you go print those out, please? Or Naomi's got it. It's kind of presenting. Yeah, so we'll distribute those to you and then you can see kind of what it's been like historically. I can tell you off the top of my head that, you know, the last assessment rate increase was, I believe, 2018. That was $5 assessment increase. Before that, you were doing about $5 every 2 years prior. But you haven't had an assessment increase in the past 4 years now. So if you were keeping that same trend of $5 assessment increase every 2 years in the past, you would see that this $10 is warranted because you skipped that assessment increase that you had kind of been doing historically to keep up with the times.
Thank you, Joe.
No, that's a good point. Go ahead, Tracy.
Joel, when would we have typically made that $5, what year?
So based on,
In
yeah.
5 years, we have not increased, right?
I think it's 4, but it could potentially be 5 going now. And you'll see that in the printout here.
Okay.
But I think it's important to note that, you know, historically assessment increases have varied, but in recent years, you had been making an assessment increase of about $5 every 2 years, with the exception of the last 4 years, which I don't know the specifics off the top of my head, but you could see that if you were to make that and keep that trend up, you'd be in line with the scenario 2 today.
Okay, thank you.
Scenario 3 inputs is everything that scenario 2 has. However, it's just changing kind of the machinery and equipment purchasing schedule for maintenance to include everything also in scenario 3. From the $730,000 deficit under scenario 2 to the, we'll call it net zero deficit under scenario 1, this is a $1.3 million deficit. Which is approximately, you know, $237,337,000 increase. This warrants an assessment increase of $15 if you were to round it up. And the only thing that changed under here is purchasing more heavy equipment and machinery to kind of tackle that curve faster. And you see that here under the key inputs. Everything that's under the key inputs that's in black is scenario 2, and then you see the scenario 3 additions of a small excavator, a backhoe, and a small bulldozer included in that. And that is the end of my presentation. We'll grab a copy of this.
Thank you, Mr. Franz.
Let me go over this real quick. I mean, you guys can see it, but you will see under that total column, you can see that the assessment, if you look from the bottom of $90, hasn't increased since 2019. So that's 4 years. Before that, you had an assessment increase in 2017 of $10. Before that, you had an assessment increase in 2015 of $5, so on and so forth. So you can see if you were to keep that trend, that of every 2 years increase in the assessment, that you would be theoretically at scenario 2, which is the $10 adjustment. If you increase it by the minimum increase over those recent terms, which is $5.
Thank you very much. And a key point that I want to note, the assessment in 2009 was $80. We've gone up $10 in 15 years.
Thank you.
Questions on Mr. Franzoi's presentation from the board? I'm going to open it to input from the public on the presentation. Is there any members of the public which wish to provide input on Mr. Franzoi's presentation? Mr. Hernandez.
In the past, when we had the screening card, it made a big difference on acquisition of equipment. Are we still working on that? I know CID is still interested in that as well and pushing that.
That was, so I will state that the irrigation district would be interested in the federal screening card for equipment. we are also interested in having that restored. Any other comments or input from the public? Thank you very much. I'll go back to the board. Are there any comments from the board before I make mine? Hearing none, so my colleagues have heard what I'm about to say many times. I just want to be sure that I'm clear about it for the record. We have a statutory obligation to determine the needs of the district annually, to assess our constituents and approve budget accordingly. We do that collaboratively as a board. Not any one of us is slated with making that determination alone. Collaboratively we work, we all have our own viewpoints and opinions, we come to a decision. But I want to state that it is my opinion that our irrigation district is underfunded. Significantly underfunded. We are underfunded based on my evaluation of the needs of the irrigation district. We are underfunded based on my evaluation of other irrigation districts and how they are funded in our area. We are underfunded based on the changes in the costs given current inflationary pressures. We are underfunded. It is my opinion that to get into balance with the current needs of the district, as well as filling the hole that we have dug in our attempts to keep assessments low, that assessments need to increase somewhere in the area of $30 to $40 an acre, starting now, with reasonable assessment increases moving forward. That is the amount that I believe we are underfunded. We still would be assessed less than comparable irrigation districts. I am not interested in having an irrigation district that looks underfunded to the rest of the world. I am interested in having an irrigation district that looks like the standard for world-class irrigation districts. I'm interested in having that for both my own operation and the operations of all our constituents. You can't squeeze water from a stone, although our district personnel is trying very hard to do that. I believe that we need significant, bold, transformational changes in how we fund our district if we want to be vibrant, relevant, and world leaders in irrigation moving into the next century. Thank you. So with that, we've been presented 3 scenarios. What is the will of the board?
We have to pass a budget.
Yeah.
Someone has to say something.
That's it. We're gonna get there. It's only been a few seconds. Okay, we can stand a little side.
We needed a little silence right there. I'll go ahead and say this, we've been on this, and I've been on this budget committee about, there's 2 things here, Greg, wants and needs, and the things that we can get done in this valley where we've had not only drought, but we've had so many increases on all the things that I grow have just gone off the chart. My wife, I run things past her a little bit once in a while, and I run the different scenarios past her. And she says, okay, now you're telling me all my fertilizer's going up and all this. And she said, you look at your long range forecast on, I'm gonna get less water next year. Now you're gonna increase. Not only am I gonna have to pay more water for water I'm not getting, but I'm gonna have to pay more for the water I'm pumping. Now, that's kind of the attitude that you're gonna run into everywhere. So what you try to do is make this thing fit. So I would like to make the motion scenario 2. And see if we
I have a motion on the floor to adopt scenario 2.
get a discussion.
Is there a second? I have to complete the motion before we can discuss it. Is there a second?
I'll second.
I have a second by Mr. Frank Paul Solopek for scenario 2. With that, we open to debate for scenario 2. Ms. Esslinger?
Just for clarification, scenario two would be an increase of $10 per acre. Is that correct?
That is correct. Scenario 2 has us increasing assessments $10 an acre, with the very general stipulation of how that increases in assessment will be expended by the district.
If you guys want me to give a recap real quick of what that benefit is.
Please do.
Okay, so the recap of that benefit, as you can see here, is that we are purchasing new computer and equipment, upgrading the cell phones of engineers, things of that nature. For maintenance, we are acquiring more machinery and equipment. We're increasing the labor rates of all EBID employees. There was, staff that had forfeited their salary increases last year, and to be more competitive with heavy equipment operators and ditch riders, it is adding a project manager to engineering and a temporary clerk for finance.
Thank you. And will you bring up the CapEx for scenario 2 as well, please? Thank you. Further discussion, Mr. Lyons?
So scenario 1 is no increase.
No salary increases. Scenario 1, as I explained earlier, will be 3%, which is business standard anti-inflationary measures, as we know, that doesn't keep up with current levels of inflation. You will not be competitive in the market. You will be behind on machinery and equipment. You will not be hiring a project manager in engineering, and you will not be hiring a staff in finance.
And scenario 2, you just recap. You recaps, that's $10.
Yes.
The scenario 3, which you recap there.
Yeah, scenario 3, and I'll just move to the end, just adds machinery and equipment, a small excavator and a backhoe and a small bulldozer. It's important to note that under the scenario 3, our ditch riders don't have access to the backhoe 710. That's all used by the maintenance department currently. Acquiring that more recently would allow them to do more maintenance on the irrigation side of the district.
Your assessment cost.
$15. Now, it's also important to note that under scenario 2, since I'm rounding in $5 increments for the assessment adjustment, there is somewhat of a built-in cash reserve. It won't be very large under scenario 2, but it would be helpful if we decided to spend that wherever we want. I would recommend keeping that in as a cash reserve for, unprecedented events such as, equipment breakdowns and repairs and things like that.
Thank you.
Ms. Esslinger?
So I'm going to ask this question for constituents out there that would wonder what would happen if we increased $5, because sometimes we have done that. So just your response to that.
My response to that is that might make you more competitive in the market. I'd have to do kind of that scenario. What effectively it gets is you might as well increase it to $10, because if you increase it $5, it's not enough to make an impact. And if you do it 0, you're just at a deficit, and then you're kind of in between those two, right? Where you're not really making an impact, you're at a deficit, it's just not as big of a deficit. So I would say that's kind of where $5 gets you. And depending on how the board would elect to spend that $5, let's say you moved it into machinery and equipment. Sure, well, now you don't have any ditch riders or heavy equipment operators to operate that machinery and equipment, and vice versa, right? So I think those are kind of the things that we talked about in the budget committee that you get into with that kind of level of assessment increase.
Thank you, Mr. Francois. Thank you, Ms. Esslinger. Mr. Calhoun?
Yes, at the level 1, basically you're saying it's a $5 or 3%.
Scenario 1 is $0 assessment increase. That means you leave them the same.
I believe, and I understand better after seeing this chart, it's down a lot of years, but not much. And we have to do something. A lot of my constituents are dead set on 0, and, I can't totally agree with that myself. But, I'd like to, we still have the director to bring in, and we're doing these other options. This coming year, we had some water this year, which was a big relief to everybody. And, keeping that in mind, that's what we're in business to do, is have this water. But, I think, I would be, still, it's baby steps, but I'd still stay with level 1 at this point. Till this election is over and we're real more right now.
Okay.
That's not, I'm not trying to put it off, but that's probably what it sounds like, but we can't do nothing anymore. That's my opinion.
Just to be clear though, level 1 is doing nothing, it's leaving it the same as it is.
Thank you, Mr. Brunswick. Thank you, Mr. Calhoun. Please, you continue that report.
Yeah. That's I've said what I need to say.
Thank you, Mr. Calhoun. I'll thank you, Joe.
I just say, if we don't do anything, what's gonna happen is we're not gonna be competitive, we're not gonna have the people to run the system. And maintain the system, and then we're gonna be in for a major wake-up call down the road. Right? Doing a scenario 2 does bring us up a more comfortable position. I'm not in favor, nobody's in favor of price increases on anything, but being in the business, it all goes up. And if we can't get the water, we're losing out, so that's my recommendation to him.
Thank you, Ms. Salt. Thank you, Mr. Miles.
In my opinion, I hate to see price increase. But we did have water last year. Hopefully, Dr. King's estimate of 12 is low. But, we can get 12 inches. That'll help quite a bit. But we can't continue kicking the can down the road. I agree with Frank Paul said. I think we need to at least do the number 2. Ideally, we do the number 3 and get our equipment up to par. Because we went backwards on our equipment the last few years. And not having access to government equipment other. I see it going back, if you look at the life of our equipment. Each one of us likes to buy a new tractor once in a while, and I think we need to continue spending some money and making an investment. This is a long-term investment, it's not a short-term investment. So ideally, we probably ought to be a scenario 3, but I think in reference to a lot of people that wanted 0, I think we ought to be going number 2. That's my personal opinion.
Thank you, Mr. Lyon. Ms. Esplin.
Mr. Chairman, this is just a remark, having been in some of the budget meetings. I think one of the things that was convincing to me is paying our employees. I think all of us as farmers would like to be at the 90 rate, but looking at staffing and understanding how in this competitive market, many of our employees can choose to go elsewhere. And so I think it's very important that we keep our staff and keep a quality staff. And that was one of the convincing reasons for me that I would entertain going up $10 assessment.
Thank you, Ms. Esplin. Mr. Calhoun.
I'd like to also say with what he has said and Steve, that I am being perfectly clear for my own employees. I have increased it. I've talked to you, Joel, about ditch fires and trying to be competitive. And if the number 1 is that flat, is that what you're saying?
Number 1 is effectively a 3% increase, which will not keep you competitive in the market. Correct. It means you're doing a bare minimum to counter inflation, which isn't countering inflation under current measures right now. And I believe that, government agencies have elected a increase of 6+% for their employees, which are already being compensated more than your employees. So just keep that in mind too, is that if you increase it by 3%, they're increasing it 3% more than, and they already have the upper hand on it, right?
Greg, one more point.
One moment, Mr. Kelly, do you have anything additional?
No, no. I thought he was gonna,
Mr. Lack.
sorry about that. The thing that I agree with Paul on that we've seen in this budget committee that we were looking at is the fact that if we fail and this program that we're in goes like Sam back to zero and we lose these employees, how are we gonna start a water system up next year without employees? You can't do that. And then what happens when we default just a little bit, it goes back to being run by the government. I don't know if you know this, but I don't think they do as good a job as we do. And no offense to the government. I'm just telling you. In my opinion, we don't need to go back there. And if we don't get this, like Greg says, the EBID in a positive direction and going forward, we're just gonna be in another bone pile somewhere. And I sure don't want that. I think this is a great organization. I love the people. I love what we do. I think we have vision. I think we do have great. Sometimes if you look at our district compared to the rest of the district, there's a lot of things we do very well, and they look at us for that leadership. So let's continue to do that. That's my comment.
Thank you, Mr. Lack. Mr. Gillis. I'm gonna, Mr. Gillis have the floor. Mr. Gillis.
Yes.
I feel like probably it should be in the 15 range, but it's hard to do things when we're in a drought. And I think if you figure 15 or an average of water that we've received since 2015, it's hard to go up that $15 because it doesn't figure out very well percentage wise and what, that we're receiving. And we hope and pray that we're out of this drought. We don't know. And if we continue to get the amount that we're getting, I think that we can survive and maybe go up later. But at this point in time, I feel like the $10 is where we're going to have to be. So
Thank you, Mr. Gillis.
Greg, real quick.
Oh.
I was gonna make one more quick point, and I think it's important that the board know this, is that there is going to be projects down the horizon to maintain federal infrastructure, such as the Mesilla Dam, the Leesburg Dam. Those costs are not baked into this whatsoever. And getting the equipment and edge, assuming we don't get a federal screening card for those projects, that money is funded to us. However, it's a loan, it's a transaction, it's a long-term loan from the federal government, but that is going to go into your assessment costs in the future too. And we are required to maintain that infrastructure. We don't have a choice. We're gonna have to take out a loan and maintain that. Now, the more equipment we have here in-house, the less we have to take a loan out to get in the future, right? And as you guys know, that those kind of things. Sam, do you know the interest on that?
Yeah, I want to clarify. There is no discussion happening currently regarding taking out a loan of any kind. Okay, so what he's doing is forecasting. He is not telling you that anybody is in any way going to talk about loans outside of the statutory process in which we would have to do that. Okay, there is a loan program being offered by the federal government, which we are internally evaluating. There is no discussion, and we've got to be very careful about that because loans and debt of certain amounts have to go to the membership, not just the board. So I want to be very careful that we understand we're not talking about doing that. And then as far as the details of the program, we're still evaluating it internally.
Correct. I just want to state that you guys are gonna have unforeseen obstacles that I think that as a agricultural community, and I grew up in it as well, you forget about everything else that goes into managing your district, managing the irrigation systems. You think about your canals and your checks and and that's all good, but you have to remember that there's more moving pieces to this that you guys will have to pay for. And you look at these pictures all around you, they had to put that up first, right? Back in their time, that was the big projects that they did. And it gets passed down, history repeats itself. So just keep that in mind that down the road, there will be things, and the more equipped you are to handle those scenarios, the better off you're gonna be as a district. And that's something.
I have a question. Ms. Cargill talking about on the federal equipment.
Yes.
What chances is there of us actually doing that?
So Gary go ahead, Gary.
Yeah, when I was purchasing agent years ago, I was the one that found the screening card that the federal government offered. And it is for equipment that comes back from the wars, Gulf Wars and those wars that we had in the Middle East. And they sit in these yards, these government yards. And I'm saying it's hundreds of acres of equipment of all sorts. And we had the ability to get that screening capability up until 1996, when the federal government gave back our deeds to the property that the government used to own, which was the canals, laterals, and drains. Since 96, I've been advocating that we still operate under contract 3 federal dams. That's Percha, Leesburg, and Mesilla. And under that contract, we have O&M to do on those federal dams, which have 300 feet upstream and 100 feet downstream of property, including the dam. And the Bureau expects us to maintain them. So my latest request was give us back our screening card so that we can federally acquire the equipment we need to work on your federally owned dam. And so that's my case. And I think we have an opportunity to go to the commissioner of the Bureau in a month with that request, that we have certain equipment we need to fix these dams. I mean, you're having to think about safety. Our employees need the scaffolding, they need the bucket trucks to get under the dam to fix the girders and the things that hold the road up, the bridges, the gates. It's all unusual equipment, but it's necessary for us to fix the dam. So I think logically, I'm working with Leo and Joa to come up with a list of equipment that we would ask the Bureau to use a screening card to go and purchase and acquire this product. And that's my simple request is we have a federal facility that we operate and maintain. We have a federal screening card that can give us that equipment. Let's do it. That's what I believe will be my request. And I think it's logical.
Mr. Gill? Did you have any follow-up on that, Mr. Gill? Mrs. Alpert?
We asked last year also, and we have been given the process that we need to follow through with to actually see this through to the end and get a change in policy from the Bureau of Reclamation. I've been working through that process. I would say, because we can't tell you in open session certain pieces of what we're working on and how we're working on it, it is both legal and policy driven as well as politics driven. So plan as though we don't succeed, right? Anytime I'm up against politics, you have to assume that something big might happen or might not happen. Plan as though we're not going to get that federal screening card back, but understand we're working hard to do it. We've put together a coalition. We've tried to bring in other members. We are lobbying for it at the highest level. And there are certain things that the Bureau can and can't do. Okay, so I would say your best bet is to plan as though we don't succeed. And then if we do, treat it as a windfall and maybe you don't have to increase your assessment later.
Mr. Lack, did you have to?
No, I'm just gonna say, don't we have a motion on the table? I know
We
we're
do.
just-
We are in discussion. The motion on the floor
Okay.
is to adopt scenario 2. That is the motion that is up for debate. So I will start my comments with gratitude. I would like to express gratitude to the staff for the extraordinary efforts they put forth in the last 60 to 90 days to bring the information together at all staff levels, to distill it and get it up to the board in a format that we can start making the hard decisions. I wish to express gratitude to the constituents who discussed the funding of the district, who discussed the budget of the district with me, despite differing viewpoints, and continue to do so and provide me their input. I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful to the budget committee for the several meetings that they have attended, for the open and frank discussions about the needs of the districts and the struggles of our constituents. I thank all of my colleagues for taking the time to seriously consider how we move forward. With those things said, based on the customs of the board, it is unlikely I will be voting today. However, I wish to express my opposition to the motion because I believe it is insufficient. Limiting myself to the 3 scenarios that we have presented, I would oppose the adoption of scenario 2. Any other discussion? Ms. Sullivan.
Just a clarification, you expressed your opposition to the motion.
That is
because
correct.
it's insufficient. Do you mean your opposition to scenario 2? The motion is procedurally sufficient.
I'm sorry. Thank you. To clarify, I am opposed to adopting scenario 2 as the budget for our next fiscal year. But it's unlikely I will be making a vote as such. Based
You
on the
agree
custom.
that procedurally we are.
Procedurally, we are sufficient. So
All
we
right,
will be moving
thank you.
forward with the motion. Any further discussion? Hearing none, discussion is closed. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Aye. Hearing one vote of opposition, one vote of opposition for Mr. Calhoun. In the opinion present, the ayes have it, the motion carries. Thank you very much. That brings us to our next item of business, which is the financial report. It's Byron.
Cash flow disappeared. Good morning. After that wonderful presentation, I'm afraid I'm back to lots of little numbers on a screen. See if I can get this shared and expanded. How do I share this again? Because I don't know. I know Teams better than Zoom. Okay. First is the cash report. This is as of this morning. We had 3.5 million between cash and investments this morning. This day last year we had 2.2, so we are ahead. You can see our investment activity for this year versus last year, where the interest income is about 10 times what it was last year, which has been a significant help. And we have about 2 weeks left in the year, but I do anticipate that we're going to have some more expenses coming up for some pipe that we've been buying, getting ready for the construction season. But other than that, that's kind of where your cash is sitting. And I stand for questions on this. And I'll go to the balance sheet. I was gonna try to make this fewer numbers, but that didn't work. I'm sorry. Let's see, where'd my plus? So here's your balance sheet. Again, this is as of August. I'm also working on September. It doesn't look like things have changed on the balance sheet aspect much as far as assets and liabilities between August and September, but I will be presenting September later. Things haven't changed actually from prior months as far as the balance sheet goes. This is a lot of detail, but it's so that if you wish to have this information, you can. For the LID, there is again not much happening for it. We have been slowly but surely collecting money on the assessments. And are there any questions?
I see none.
Okay. And I'm gonna go straight to the really small one.
Do you want me to help you share your screen?
Hi.
Thank you. I apologize for not noting that.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting how all the systems have different ways of doing things. So again, we have our August profit and loss. This is still the year-to-date budget. I'm looking forward to having Joa's budget to actuals so that it comes in a graphical version, and we can use the full year instead of just a year-to-date version. So I anticipate getting a lot of benefits for you from that. I am going to be requesting reimbursement on the grants this month, and so I hope to have that change soon. Not much, a lot have happened as far as revenues in August. We have our expenses. Of course, the big one is our overtime for our personnel costs and our operations and fuel. Those two are the biggies for the operations. There are some items here where they show over budget, but again, this is year to date, and some of this is just timing. The insurance is because we had to anticipate what the insurance was going to be from July on, and it went up. Went up more than we anticipated. So some of this is we just didn't know what it was going to be. The good news is that we are for total expenses at 75% of the year to date, so we are still fine. And if this had been 100% budget, we would expect to be at 83%, but this is 75% of the year to date, so we're still in good shape there. Are there any questions about anything I can answer for?
I see none.
Okay. I can leave this up. That is it for the financial report. There are a number of contract renewals that I do not have presentations on. The first one is for ready mix concrete from GCC. It is a year 4 of 4 renewal, the prices have gone up the 10% from $145 per cubic yard to $160. This is not unexpected, but kind of the way things have been going. The next is the professional services contract for Dwayne Legg, for electrical engineering services. This contract is one where it's a maximum of $60,000 per year, but it's in year 3 of 4. And we have the professional lobbyist services for water strategies. Their fees increased 10% from $3,500 a month to $5,000 per month. Again, that's a $60,000 a year contract, so they're going up to their maximum there.
Mr. Chair, can I comment on that? Yes, Mr. Francois.
Yeah, so we just had a meeting with Water Strategies. Greg was there, Gary was there. They have great plans that they have been putting together. Teams that we can work with. We can work with everybody in our community, you know, state government. They lobby in DC. They do a great job. They're helping us get even vendors in for concrete line canals, automation, things of that nature. Me and Mr. Chris Pauly had discussions that he was actually giving us a discount in comparison to what he charges everybody else. He actually advocated for not increasing his rates, given, you know, kind of the turmoil and circumstances here at EBID. And I just want to let you guys know that I said that, you know, we'll put him in the budget, so that is included in the budget. It's a factual increase. I think he provides great value and benefit to EBID.
Thank you, Mr. Francois. And I want to mention that I concur with Mr. Francois' assessment. Had the pleasure of working with Mr. Pauly considerably during my tenure with EBID. I would like to see us utilize this service as well. That's really my only comment on that. We have opportunities that we can get even more value from them. We should be considering how we most effectively do that as board of directors. As most of the things I suggest, doing that looks a lot like work. It looks a lot like work. And so we just need to figure out how we will accomplish that work and how we share that load amongst ourselves. Do you have any other items on those 3 contract renewals?
Not on those 3.
I had a question regarding the ready mix concrete contract. I note that this is its final year of renewal. The form of that contract, well, it's a hard one for me to read because I'm so spoiled by the standard contract that's been created for our district. It makes it very easy for me to evaluate these contracts and at the board meeting. Given that that's not a professional services contract, do we have some sort of standard form that contracts like that will be going to? Mrs. Solopek, I see you have a comment.
This is our standard contract for goods.
For goods.
So we have a services contract and a goods contract, and this is a goods contract. This is on my standard form now, which I standardized for you guys a few years ago. It's just not what you normally see, but it is our standard, and it's a goods contract.
Thank you. Then I will note that I need to get myself better versed in the goods contract. I see the others so much more, and I'm accustomed to how the scope of work is structured, where I can go to find that, how the fee structure is scheduled, where I can go to find that. Mr. Barrett, did you have a comment? No, I couldn't tell if you were stretching or if you.
No, you're stretching. Be careful, they'll call on you.
Thank you very much. Are there other comments or questions from the board? All right, hearing none, specifically, I will ask, is there any board member that would wish to single out one of these contracts for consideration? Hearing none, what is the will of the board on the 3 contract amendments? I have a motion by Mr. Frank Paul Solopek to accept the three contract renewals that were presented. Second. A second by Mr. Gillis. Any discussion? Hearing none, discussion is closed. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The president, the ayes have it, and the motion carries. That brings us to our audit contract. Byron.
So, the finance, department with Joa's, assistance, we went out and we submitted 28 requests for proposal to, the auditors on the state auditor approved list. We received 3 responses. We evaluated the 3 responses, and based on our evaluation, we chose Fiero and Fiero for the auditing contract. They have audited EBID in the past. And they had a cost of $13,525 plus GRT per year. And they would be happy to do our audit. Our previous auditor from last year declined renewing his contract. He said his firm had shrunk to the point where he could not adequately serve us. And that's it.
Thank you, Ms. Byron. So you mentioned that Fiero has conducted audits for us in the past. When was the last time they audited our district, give or take?
About 3 years.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, my final question, just to confirm that this is the approved contract format from the state auditor?
Correct.
Thank you. Comments from the board? Hearing none. What is the will of the board?
To approve contract.
I have a motion from Mr. Sal Nunez to approve the contract Fiero and Fiero,
Second.
seconded by Ms. Esslinger. Any discussion? I would like to note I had some concerns with the last audit we received from this firm. I would like to note that and ask that we work with them to ensure that those concerns don't repeat themselves in the future.
You have concerns regarding this firm's last audit?
I believe that is correct, based on if it was 3 years ago. I may be misremembering the firm.
Last year was the other one, right?
No, it's not last year.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So if I am mistaken on that, then the comment can be ignored.
Okay.
I can make comment there. Mr. Franzoy.
I'm not certain if you're mistaken. I will say that we had to retire this firm in the past due to regulations regarding how long they can be your auditor for. Based on the other contract we reviewed, they have the most experience with irrigation districts, whereas the other auditing firms had none for irrigation districts. And they have historically done EBID's audits, so they're familiar with EBID and they have historical audits. I know that those are posted online, anybody can get them, but they have experience in doing EBID audits. So I'll just put that out there.
Thank you. I could be off on the time frame, and so I want to be
I
clear.
just want to state, I think you are,
Thank
because like Joa said, we have to rotate them out every now and then, and it was after that, my understanding
Thank you.
of, if I'm telepathing what you're
I think you are.
telepathing. I think that you're a year over.
Okay. So, with that, thank you for that clarification.
I will look into it though. I will be sure to.
That's great. Any other discussion?
No.
Hearing no more, discussion is closed. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? In the opinion of the president, the ayes have it and the motion carries. The contract is awarded to Fiero and Fiero. That brings us to the contract approval for Velocity.
Yes. So our, pretty much the same, evaluation team plus our HR director evaluated proposals from numerous software companies that provide human resources and payroll software services. We got price quotes from 4 of them. We evaluated those. We got demos of their software multiple times from the softwares. The first software that we chose was not able to provide a contract that we could work with. This is our number 2 choice. We were actually fairly split between number 1 and number 2. We think that number 2, even though they did come in second, will still provide all the services that we need and do a good job doing so. Their price comparison was very similar, and that would be about they estimate about $27,000 a year for not only doing HR services such as onboarding and helping us look for new employees and keeping track of all of our employee information, but it will also streamline and provide additional ways and accuracies for our payroll. And currently we're spending more than this for those 2 services together. So it's actually not only that, but it's a cost saving measure. That's kind of all I had for detail or summaries, information, not details for the Paylocity. Is there further questions for me?
Questions from the board? Those contracts are a lot shorter than the last one reviewed, which is good. Ms. Saltbeck, I just want to confirm that there were some things in the previous contract that we cannot do as a government entity. Do we have any of those concerns with this contract?
So not with Paylocity. I understand there's a few different kinds of contracts. We try to shoehorn them into boxes that fit regular cookie cutter like. So we have those contracts that fit our 2 forms, services and goods. And then you get to companies like Comcast, where they just have their standard agreement, right? So you typically would just enter that agreement, but there are other rules regarding where and how New Mexico taxpayer dollars can be spent. So if there are provisions in those agreements, typically companies will just say, okay, line item amount, we'll agree on about our day we go. In this instance, this company didn't have an objectionable contract except in one sense, and they were willing to change that so it's approvable. If this is the company you want to go with. Our first choice company refused to make changes to their standard form. Their standard form violates New Mexico law. We simply could not legally agree to it. So, for example, it contained indemnification provisions where EBID indemnifies a private entity in certain circumstances. Well, that's a violation of the law in New Mexico. So there's things like that that we have to look for in these other types of standardized contracts. And you'll see those mostly in the IT software world. And that's because we don't do standard IT software, but they all have their standard agreements. And so that's the one area where we're always going to see a different kind of contract than the standard that you're used to that I created for you. So in this instance, it's not objectionable.
Thank you very much for that clarification. Other comments from the board? Hearing none, what is the will of the board? I have a motion by Mr. Frank Saltbeck to accept the contract Paylocity. Second. I have a second from Mr. Sal Nunez. Discussion. Hearing none, discussion is closed. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? In the opinion of the president, the ayes have it. The motion carries. Lastly, we approved the budget scenario Do we need something separate for the budget resolution, or is our motion to approve scenario 2 sufficient for our resolution?
You have to pass the resolution.
Okay. We have a resolution on the budgets, resolution 2023-008. It says, after the whereas is, be it resolved, the governing body of the Elton Butte Irrigation District, State of New Mexico hereby adopts the final budget herein, which will be added to the resolution based on our decision, and respectfully requests approval from the local government division of DFA. That resolution is before us. Questions about the resolution? Hearing none, what's the will of the board on the resolution? I have a motion from Mr. Sal Nunez to approve resolution 2023-008.
Second.
A second from Mr. Frank Paul Solopek. Any discussion? Hearing none, discussion is closed. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Continuing the president, the ayes have it. The motion carries. Resolution 2023-08 is adopted. All right, that brings us to the manager's report. I would like to start by mentioning a letter that the district was CC'd on from our Rio Grande Compact Commissioner, Mr. Bobby Scode. This letter was to Mr. Wayne Poland, the regional director for the Bureau of Reclamation. And in it, he states his support for funding the Rio Grande Basin projects. I appreciate the opportunity to provide support for the request from the Elton Butte Irrigation District to the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation for funding to complete their proposed stormwater and infrastructure projects in the Rio Grande Basin. The Rio Grande Basin is a critical nexus for the management of our water resources, and the Elton Butte Irrigation District's proposal for these projects is welcomed by the Texas Rio Grande Compact Commissioner. Sincerely, Robert Scode. So I'd like to thank our Compact Commissioner for his support and the recognition of the importance to not just our district, but to the project as a whole, and our region to the accomplishments of these stormwater and infrastructure projects. So thank you very much, Mr. Esslinger, for providing me a copy of that. And thank you again to Commissioner Scode. With that, Mr. Esslinger, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I just want to announce officially the EBID 2023 Board of Election will be coming up Tuesday, December 5th, 2023, and there's 7 precincts that will be on the ballot. Precincts 1, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. I believe you've been passed out of your petition. You need 25 signatures on it. We need it returned by November 1st, no later than November 15th. For those board members that are present today. This year we'll have 3 polling places, similar to what we had in 2020 with the COVID issue facing us. We have the EBID hatch yard up on Highway 187. We will have the EBID main office here on Melendres, and we'll have our south voting poll location at the EBID Chamberino yard. All of those listed above will be open that morning, early, 7 a.m. and it goes 8 a.m. until 7. 6, excuse me. And so I just want you to be aware of what those locations are. And then the other important thing is the canvas for the election. After the polls are closed will be on Monday, December 11th. That will be at 9 o'clock here in the boardroom, where we'll canvass the votes of those who voted in the different precincts. If you have any questions, let Naomi know that she kind of runs the election office for us, and certainly, again, it's important for you all to make sure to get your petitions in, with 25 signatures before November 1st, no later than November 5th. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Welcome, Mr. Esslinger. Ms. Esslinger.
Gary, just for clarification, the sheet says you must have 20 names on the petition. You're saying 25 with one. It's whatever that's on here.
So for clarification, I do believe the state statute requires the signature of 20 qualified electors.
Okay.
I would recommend you have at least 25, because there's a reasonable.
If we strike one because they're not an actual qualified elector and you only have 20, then you don't get on the ballot.
Okay.
Yeah, so we recommend just always getting more, because we will check them, and they have to have at least 2 acres or more.
And so the request was to have them into the district by November 1st. That gives the district the opportunity to review your petition, and if it is insufficient, you have time to correct it. If you wait till the absolute last minute of the deadline, there's no extension to that. It is set in statute. Excellent question, Ms. Esslinger. Did that answer it?
Yes, thank you.
Mrs. Solvay.
Mr. President, we typically have our board meeting the same day as the canvass of the election. We do that by moving the December regular board meeting to the date that the statute requires that we canvass, which is the Monday following the election. So if you would like to do that, we need to move the meeting. Otherwise, you'll be here twice that week, and I guarantee I can fill up 2 days for you. But if you don't want to, you should maybe consider moving your meeting.
I appreciate you noting that, Ms. Solvay. I do have that on the items of things to discuss. I'm going to hold off on asking for a decision on that until we answer any other questions regarding the nominating petitions or the election process itself, polling places, and when that will occur. I have one question. We have in the past done early voting at the district. Will that be conducted this year, or are we only voting on election day?
We have no plans to change our elections whatsoever. So whatever was offered in the past, early absentee, however you want to say it, typically is called absentee because you are unavailable on the election day. And so it's not true early voting. There is a difference under the statute.
Thank you.
And so we will still require the absentee affidavit and things like that, but that's because it's just a function of how our election statutes work. But we will be offering anything that was offered in the past.
Thank you. And do we have an expected date that absentee balloting can begin?
We,
So given that we
So
have,
I would expect probably the 1st of November, so we can get voter rolls printed.
so we have petition deadlines. So presumably, we can't finalize the ballot until the petition deadlines.
Yeah. So we need to do that in November.
we also typically will train our judges around the same time.
Let me leave it at this, because I don't want to,
We,
I don't want to risk making a mistake today. So I will state that absentee voting at the district will be available. The details about that will be on the EBID website once we have them.
and we actually are putting that together. They're waiting for a final from me, which has been delayed for other reasons, Mr. President. So I will have that for you guys now that I'm no longer delayed.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Other comments about the petition process or the voting process? That brings us to Mrs. Saltbank's point about canvassing the election. We must canvass on Monday. It's a statutory requirement. My first question is to Mr. Esslinger. Do you need 2 days worth of meetings that week? No. I didn't ask you, Mrs. Sullivan.
I think we have to December 11th. Certainly it takes a little while, but if we start the canvassing in the first thing in the morning, we'll have time to finish everything for December. Normally, the end of the season, slows down. There's not a lot on the agenda other than what maybe Sam could offer. So,
And with planning, that's why I was raising it. With plenty of planning, I can make sure anything
Okay,
is prioritized that needs to be covered. And we typically do a good job of holding the agenda for the regular meeting to fairly minimal that day. Because it is Christmas, we are shutting down for the holiday. Canvassing doesn't always take a lot of time. Even in some of our heavier years, we're already on to our board meeting by about 9:30 or 10. So as long as we know we can adjust. I mean, and you can always cancel board meetings on us too. That happens.
so
Can't cancel the canvas stuff.
understanding that. My recommendation is to move the board meeting to the 11th. That said, I would open to the board. So we'll move the comments. There is a motion by Mr. Lyles to move our dissent, and seconded by Mr. Sal Nunez to move our regular December board meeting to December 11th, with the first item on that agenda to be canvassing the election. Any discussion? Hearing none, discussion is closed. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Being present, the ayes have it. Motion carries. Our December board meeting is moved to December 11th. With the understanding that if necessary, I will call a special board meeting to conduct any business we are unable to complete that day. Mr. Esslinger, did you have anything you wanted to cover regarding the water strategy September monthly report?
no, sir, other than it's there for your information. Again, it's a opportunity to hear from what's happening in Washington and what bills are going before different committees. Water strategies put together a summary of those activities, and that's what's in the board.
Thank you, Mr. Esslinger. That brings us to engineering. Mr. Randall.
Yes, sir. We'll have a presentation. Mr. Barrett will join me. Let me bring that up. All right, thank you, board members. This is my second month here, first official presentation. Leo and I just want to go over some of the construction projects we have going on or have completed recently. We have the Picacho WIN, the Drought Resiliency Grant, and then the Delivering Conservation Grant that we want to cover today. First is the Picacho Water Habitat Energy Nexus. This project is largely done, 99% done. This one was located off the Picacho lateral, had a solar array and a river lift pump that were removed due to inflationary costs. All of this project was budgeted before COVID hit, BC times. And so we amended the scope of this project. We did complete the piping and the metering. And then the wasteway connection at the river that is shown here is incomplete. We're waiting on IBWC approval and additional grant funding to finish up that project, but the rest of that is complete. Next, we have the Drought Resiliency Grant implementation. It's another Water Smart grant. This one is part of their Drought Resiliency Water Smart program. With this, we'll install a new metering cable and stilling well up in the next to Mr. Joe Paul Black's property across the river there. We have the A-frames and some of the deck already fabricated where you can see that picture in the top left there of the A-frames that are sitting in the yard here. The shop will begin working on sandblasting and coating those in decks soon. I believe the stilling well is also fabricated, right, Leo?
Yes, the stilling well is also here.
Yeah, and we've received the cable, so all the materials are in. We're finishing up some kit fabrication on it and waiting for the river to dry up a little bit so we can get in there and begin working. With that, we also have Arroyo water level sensors. We'll have the 16 rain gauges, I believe some of which have already been installed. You can see a picture of those here on the left bottom. And then as part of this project, we'll also automate some stormwater gates. We'll be monitoring stormwater, sharing data with the County Flood Commission. And then there's a modeling component as part of this grant in collaboration with WRRI at the university. Yes, sir.
The picture, you see the rain gauges and weather station. They didn't come from the Gulf War. They are camo because they go out on BLM land. And we've worked very well with BLM to allow us to put these weather stations 20 miles out in the watersheds. And they have requirements that are difficult to meet sometimes. So we developed and fabricated this type of weather station so it fits their standards. We camoed them because, again, out there in those areas, you have hunters and people on four-wheel drive. So we just want to make sure they were tucked away and hidden as best we could, and it worked well. And they're appreciative of the fact that, you know, we try to blend it in with the environment. So that's my comment there. We do work well with BLM right now, and hopefully we'll continue to add to that array of rain gauges.
I would just like to add in that what you see here, rain gauges, stilling well, walkway, the A-frame, all that ball of wax is all in-house fabricated by our fabrication team. So the fabrication shop that our board approved to build a few years back, we put it up and this is what we're doing. So we're knocking out radial gates, flat gates, any kind of structure that you see that we build here. We're building for about 33% of what we would pay to have it farmed out. So in-house fabrication is paying off. And I know here a year or so ago, those of you that were here, if you remember, we showed a picture of one of the big 21-foot by 8-foot tall radial gates. And that fabrication shop in the bridge trains helped maneuver that in a safe manner to where a men could build, put together coat property and then get in the field and install in the sea dam. And getting back to some of the things we need to do for our diversion dams, that's the kind of stuff we can do in-house for that and keep costs down. And that equipment will come in play if we can get some of that equipment, like Gary was talking about, to help install that. Keep that stuff going.
Mr. Brunswick.
Matt, I have a question. And Karen as well. In terms of kind of grant work, and I know we do a cost share with labor and stuff, but Leo brings up a question I have. If we're doing this in-house fabrication, do we record it at our cost, or would we record that on the grant at market value or fair value for that work?
I think it depends on your grant. It depends on what the grant language says. I haven't dug into one in a while.
Okay.
And so I guess my focus for the other stuff we're working on is a little bit different than these existing grants that come under the current federal program. I would look at your grant to see how it's reimbursable.
Karen, there was some follow-ups back.
So we are doing the fabrication, the rates for the labor and the equipment that we're using to do that is at our, historical batch costs, the parts that go into making whatever it is, the steel, what have you, that is at our purchase cost.
Gotcha. Okay. That answers my question. Thanks.
We don't get to mark it up and.
We should.
Profit center.
We should.
I'm pretty sure I read yesterday on our grants, we're not allowed to make money from the grants, so unfortunately.
I know with that being said, though, some of our consumables in the shop. As the foreman of the shop orders his consumables that are used to build these things, he is to order those under that grant number.
Yes.
So that falls into part of our, so that cost isn't forgotten, that part of that falls into part of that match as well. So just the rod, oxygen settling, that type of thing, it's all, any of that smaller stuff even, will be costed against that.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Barrett. And any other follow-up questions on that? Mr. Franzoy, did that address your question?
Yeah, it does, and it's not making money, and it's marking up to fair market values and accounting measure, so that way we can cost share more effectively. My concern with this is that if we are reducing our.
I apologize for interrupting you. What I'm gonna request is that discussion happen, not right now. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, and then the third grant we want to talk about is the Deliver and Conservation Grant. This is another water smart water energy nexus grant. We have three key components here. We have the Three Saints Wasteway 19. That's the drawing on the screen on the right-hand side that will go in and install a pump box this maintenance season. And then we have two plastic irrigation pipe or PIP pipelines to be installed here, as well as a solar panel. Our goal is to get the pump box, and we already have some of the pipe on hand. We're working on getting the rest of that in. And then we also have the piping and relocating of the California lateral and the California extension, which will be on this next slide here. So on the left side is the full scope of that project. You can see we start going from the north, we're going to relocate the California lateral. On the right-hand side, you can see more detail of the new alignment that will be done. That part of the project will be phase 3, so next irrigation season. But this irrigation season, our goal is to finish the rest of the work that you see on the left-hand side. So that'll be the plastic irrigation pipe all through the California lateral here. We have all of the CMP there except for about 2,000 feet, right, Leo?
Right, we installed roughly 3,200 linear feet of 36-inch ultra flow CMP last year, along with 16 18-inch alfalfa valves. That was last year's first phase. It's on the California itself. This year, we're going to continue with the remaining 2,200 feet on the California, 18 more alfalfa valves, 2 box structures, and we'll have 3,600 feet to lay in on the California extension this year. We currently have about 2,600 feet set on site that has been delivered. We ordered this pipe back in May because last year we got into some issues of the plant being able to stay up with getting us the pipe. We were putting it in the ground faster than they were getting it to us. So we ordered it up early this year to give them time to get it fabricated, get it built, build all their T's and all their elbows and get all that kind of stuff done. So they start shipping it to us early. So we get started November 1st, we're cutting grade and dropping in pipe. And we started getting delivery about 3 weeks ago. And so we've got 2,600 feet in so far delivered for the California extension. And so depending on, I'll be working with Ricardo through Stallman Farms on their last irrigation, their time frame that they think that they will be harvesting, so that we can come in and we can start on the California extension where we're out of the way of what they need to do to harvest the crop. And then we'll come in after they've got it harvested, and then we'll slap in the sections right in the middle of the orchard that we may interfere with. And still have that ready in time when they kick in their pumps this next March. Last year, they kicked them in about March 15th. And so we were to build one structure and put in 2 more alfalfa valves with stock so we can meet their timeline. And so this year we'll catch that up and get that done. Along with that CMP pipe we've got to put in this year, we do have to order almost 5,500 feet of a 27-inch PIP that will be tied into a 30-inch manifold that will accept the water for the 2 pumps. And our goal is to pump about 20 CFS from the box structure built this last year, upstream a mile into a box where this will turn north and gravity feed it push with the pumps up to that point and then push the water upstream, basically, gravity feed up through the farm on next year's pace. So this year is $1 million year on this contract. I mean, on this particular project. I see last year was, the whole thing's like 1.7 million for all 3 sites, all 3 points of it. Last year we roughly spent 3. This year is going to be about $1 million, and then the third year will be the other 4. And we've got the pipe that we've got to purchase, the PIP to put in, the pumps to install, and the structures to build. Structures for this grant here is just 2 box structures for this year. And the pump structure on the Wasteway 19 will be done this year. So overall concrete structures for this project will be very minimal. It's mostly just pipe installation and pipe bedding. The concrete itself, like I said, we're looking at maybe 65 to 70 yards total on this particular grant. For concrete, our concrete contract, we're probably looking roughly no more than 250 for this upcoming season, or 250 cubic yards of concrete for a volume of us pouring this year. We do have a couple other projects Hayden will get to here in a minute that will show where some of that concrete will go, but this will be the second year of the 3-year projects under this grant.
Thank you. And if I may, Mr. Randall, just be sure I understand the right-of-way exchange. So the existing right-of-way, I do believe, is a long snow road. And we're exchanging that right-of-way for right-of-way that is now through their orchard. Do I understand that correctly?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
All right. And so then we don't just do grant funded construction. We have a lot of other things going on. Maintenance, I believe weed control is taking place in unit 3A currently.
Well, we still have district-wide, we still have some weed control going on right now, mostly in the form of mowing. And just trying to get some of the larger brush mowed down. We do have some spray rigs out there though, just doing some spot spraying. We have some young curly dock and actually some young mustard already coming up that we've been going up against in some of the shadows, that we have out there. And then again, this year, we're still battling the cocklebur. We've got an influx of cocklebur in the North Valley as well as here in the Central, starting to hit its way into the South, but had to come through some kind of flood control structure or something down the river and into our headings. But we are fighting that cocklebur, so we're wanting to try to get that burned down really well so we can actually get in there with some flame and help burn that stuff off. South Valley will be starting up burning some of what they have been spraying here pretty soon. Now that they've got more manpower freed up, they've shut the water down in their units so that skeleton crew will come out and assist with that. North Valley's just wrapping up the 1B area of spraying and mowing. Here in the Central, we are in 3B or 3A, actually going to move over into 3B by the end of the month. Typically mid-September, we shut down. We're done until our winter pass for the mustard. But just temperatures have hung in there. And so we're keep moving along, trying to get some of this under control. And we'll be end of the month, we'll have everything shut down. Spray it here by the end of this week, pretty much. Temperatures already down into the 50s, so we should be okay there. But our mowing tractors, most all that will be shut down here by the 1st of November. We'll jump into these grants. This is that time frame of the post-water season maintenance. And so that's what we're doing right now. We're knocking out a lot of turnout repairs, a lot of the other smaller things that the requests that the bid traders had that they needed as a result of this last water season. So we're knocking that out. And then we'll be jumping into the major construction as far as these grants. and some of the district projects that we have to do. We have some small district projects that we've got to do. But that'll kick in here November 1st.
So in the interest of time, we don't need to go through each one of these unless the board has specific questions about some of these.
There's specific questions from the board on any of the maintenance and engineering efforts.
All right,
I see none.
thank you, sir. I believe next we'll have the permits.
Sir. Ladies and gentlemen. All right, let me get set up here. Okay, just to summarize, so we have a total of, for our September and October right of use licenses, we've got a total of 12. One is Quest, a new buried line, fiber optic line. We have a total of 8 for Kelly Cable.
Will you turn on the screen sharing?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. Okay, as I was saying, so we have a total of 12 right of use licenses. One Quest, new buried fiber optic line, total of 8 for Kelly Cable. 4 of those are aerial fiber optic lines, 4 buried fiber optic lines, and 2 existing culvert crossings and 1 existing vehicle bridge crossing. And starting off with license number 2023 L074. That's a Quest Corporation here. They are looking to construct, operate, and maintain a buried telephone line crossing the Bullock lateral. And that's kind of their standard crossings that they work on. Next one in line here is going to be 2023 L242. And that is licensee, that's BW Francher and Frank Paul Solopek. They're looking to operate and maintain 2 vehicle culvert crossings at the west drain and the Schaefer lateral. Next one here is 2023 L243, Patricia Reisler and Colleen Shernadan, to operate and maintain an existing vehicle culvert crossing, crossing the 30 Saints West lateral. Okay, this is gonna be Kelly Cable. This is license number 2023 L244. They're looking to construct, operate, and maintain an aerial fiber optic line crossing the park drain. Next one here is gonna be Kelly Cable, 2023 L245. And they're looking to construct, operate, and maintain aerial fiber optic line crossing the Gillum lateral. Please let me know if any questions come up. Next one here, license number 2023 L246. Kelly Cable is looking to construct, operate, and maintain aerial fiber optic line crossing Las Cruces lateral. Okay, Kelly Cable, license number 2023 L247. Construct, operate, and maintain aerial fiber optic line crossing Las Cruces lateral. That's the second one for Las Cruces lateral. Kelly Cable, 2023 L248. The Kelly Cables look construct, operate, and maintain buried fiber optic line crossing Las Cruces lateral. License number 2023 L249, Kelly Cable, looking to construct, operate, and maintain buried fiber optic line crossing Las Cruces lateral again at a different station. License number 2023 L250, Kelly Cable, to construct, operate, and maintain buried fiber optic line crossing Las Cruces lateral. Again, this is another station. And And this should be the last one here. That's a license number at 2023 L251, Kelly Cable, looking to construct, operate, and maintain buried fiber optic line crossing the park drain. Next one here is license number 2023 L252, Frank Paul Solopek and BW Francher, to operate and maintain an existing vehicle bridge crossing the west side main lateral. And that is gonna be your total of 12 licenses.
Thank you, Mr. Gamboa.
Yes, sir.
Are there questions overall regarding the 12 the 12 licenses as presented? Cecily?
Yeah, my question is on the land use fees, whether they request to be waived. Will you clarify, how we distinguish that between constituents, other companies coming to us, to collect those fees? If that makes sense.
So
Good.
I will specifically say it is written in policy. And probably the best thing for us to do would be to quote from the policy. And staff works to implement the policy as they understand it's been written and approved by the board.
Yeah, no, that's correct. And usually what it is, if it's for agricultural use, that's sometimes the way it's kind of for the policy right there. That's what the way, why they're waived.
And I don't recall the specific language. I don't have the policy right in front of me. Would you like that clarification before we act on these policies or these permits today?
I think your answer is sufficient. I'm a new board member, and so that's why I'm asking for that information.
Yeah, the very general scope of that would be, is it from an EBID member for the purposes of agriculture? So when we have culvert crossings that are to get farm equipment from one side of the structure to another for farming purposes, the policy allows us to waive the fees for that. Similarly, if they are for utilities to function, to operate an ag facility, those would fall into the policy as well. If it is a culvert crossing for the driveway in my home, it does not, very broadly speaking. Is that helpful?
Yes.
Mr. Randall?
Mr. President, I pulled up the
Thank you.
policy and can read from that if you would like.
Please do.
And it is on our website for anyone that needs it in the future. But I can also send it to you, Ms. Slender. So, fee and cost waiver. Fees and charges may be waived by the board when the issuance of specific permits is deemed to be in the interest of EBID. Water users of EBID who are engaged in agriculture and agricultural activities normally will not be assessed fees for permits that improve and supplement their agricultural operations.
That's even better.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Randall. Any other follow-up questions for Tessa? Thank you very much. Excellent question.
Staff recommend approval.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments in general regarding the finance? Hearing none, the president requests that licenses 2023-L-242 and 252 be acted on separately at this time by the board.
Mr. President, I move that we pass 42 and 252.
Thank you. I have a motion by Mr. Lyles to approve licenses 2023-L-242 and 252.
And waive the land fee.
And waive the fees. And a second of that motion by Mr. Gillis. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, discussion is closed. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Are there any abstentions? One abstention from Mr. Frank Paul Solomon. In the opinion of the president, the ayes have it and the motion carries. What is the will of the board on the balance of the requested licenses? I have a motion by Mr. Frank Paul Saltek to approve the remaining licenses.
Second.
I have a second by Ms. Esslinger. Any discussion? I believe we have one in there that has requested fees waived. Is that correct? 243. So that's as presented. So is there anyone that is
Yes.
opposed to waiving those fees? If so, I'd like to hear that opposition now.
That's.
Hearing none. Any further discussion? Discussion is closed. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any of the president, the ayes have it and the motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Gambo.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett, as well. That brings us to HR and safety, and Mr. Esslinger, I believe we have some employee recognition.
Yes, sir. We certainly do. First of all, before we get to those folks, I just want to make sure everybody understands that right now our count of employees here is 71. We still have some job openings. We can still for 5 ditch riders, equipment operators, 1, and excuse me, 2, and then still mechanics. We also have recognition of some folks here that been with us several years, and we'd like to recognize them. We have Julian Hernandez Jr. He's been with us since 2018. And we recognize him. We recognize Orlando Kitty. I don't think he's in the room, but works in hydrology, and he's been here since October 12, 1998, 25 years. And that's it. Those are those that we would like to recognize, and just bringing you up to speed on retirement. We have Mr. Ray Reddy, who will retire at the end of this year. He's been with us for 26 years. He's a south maintenance mechanic and maintenance support, and we recognize him and we'll ask him to come and thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Esslinger. I want to express my appreciation to staff for the recognition of employees as they hit these milestones. And I want to express my appreciation to them and all of those that dedicate their days to serving the constituents of EBID. I'm grateful for it. And I'd like to continue doing this. I appreciate the opportunity to recognize these folks as they hit these milestones. With that, we have completed our open session agenda. We have one item, the board will be going out and visiting the maintenance yard before lunch. Mrs. Saltek, can we do that visit at recess, or do I need to keep us in session until we come back?
It's a surprise, and it's not part of your regular board agenda. Just something we would like to show you.
Very good. So with that, we're going to be taking a field trip to the maintenance yard before we eat. But I will accept a motion to recess.
So moved.
I've motion by Mr. Actually, I don't think I need a motion for that. Yes, we do. Yes, I do. I have a motion by Mr. Frank Paul Saltek, seconded by Mr. Nunez to recess. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. President, motion carries. We are at recess. Thank you all for attending.